So yeah, it's going to be relatively informal, and feel free to like jump in with questions as we're kind of going through. I just kind of put this together today to kind of walk you through where we're at. So look at the brand book first and the progress that's been made there. And then we're going to jump into presentation templates and kind of the solution that we've kind of come up with for this for now. And then we're just going to quickly recap on some of the design tasks that we're going to be doing over the next few months. So yeah, brand book. Our brand book is now live in Notion. We'll do a demo of this in a second, but this is kind of what it looks like. It's kind of a central resource for all things Elsewhen. So this covers things like, you know, word mark and logo, typography and typefaces, color palettes for different programs, tone and voice, that sort of stuff. Eventually, it will be built out to include things like aspects of our brand that don't exist yet. So how we move in motion, what does our house illustration style look like? Things that aren't necessarily documented just yet, but we're starting to see the shape of in different things like the RFP covers and things like that that are going out to clients. The benefit and the reason we're doing it in Notion is that it's always up to date. There's no kind of outdated PDFs flying around anywhere. It also acts as a repository for all of the files as well. So we don't need to worry about messing around with Google Drive permissions and sending links to where logos are saved. You just jump into the brand book, click on word mark and logo, and you've got a big download button for all the files in one place. And it means we can also really carefully manage sort of version control of all these things. And yeah, if it's in Notion, basically, it's the source of truth. And you're not going to be using the wrong thing if you get it from this place, hopefully. At the moment, it's in the design part of the brand, the Notion. So if you go into Elsewhen VIP, click on design, and then within that, there's brand book, and you'll be taken to this page here. There's kind of lots of gaps in it at the moment, but we're going to be populating it over the next couple of months. It's built with Notion and Figma. So one benefit of using Notion is that you can embed Figma things in it. So I've also built out the assets library again in Figma, which includes all things like proper spacing for the logo types, all the different color variants for the different E's, all the different accessible color combinations, typography. And it means that we can also embed that directly into Notion. So there's a live link between like the real assets that we're using in design. And this might, you know, be things like the case study designs, if we eventually get those into Figma or whatever that might look like. Once again, it's just to kind of run that kind of source of truth through everything. So we're not ever using any outdated assets. And obviously all of these things are cloud-based. So we're not like working with real files that live on someone's hard drive or kind of buried at the bottom of a Slack channel somewhere. So yeah, you should all have access to both of these. You might not be able to see the Figma thing depending on if you've got Figma for a start. But yeah, it exists. And there's links to all of this stuff in the Notion as well. So a little demo. I'll just show you where that's at. So jumping into Notion. I'm assuming you can still see Notion because I'm just giving you a thumbs up because I switched screens. Great, cool. This is how it's looking at the moment. So once again, all the different categories, all the different things. Now, a lot of this stuff wasn't documented before. We kind of had loose guidelines and principles. But the idea is with these pages is that we kind of writing down what's the unwritten rules that exist at the moment. So not only is it documentation about what things look like, there's also downloads for all the different types of things that we need. So PNG versions of the logos, SVG versions. There's usage rules and best practices for how we kind of apply this thing to other assets. What works with different color combinations, how spacing should work. Once again, these are kind of all best practices rather than like rigid rules. But the idea is to get a bit of a consistency over how we're using it, you know, whether that's presentations, social media assets, blog, hero images, all of that sort of thing. So it's quite in depth, and it's, you know, I imagine it's going to be used in kind of one of those ways that you kind of read it as and when you need it. But it does have all the resources as well. So for example, in our colors, we're embedding, you know, things like the CSS hex palettes, the downloads for different color palettes for Adobe programs or Apple color lists, which is things like Keynote and those sorts of things. And they'll also live kind of in situ examples of how to use those things as well. So yeah, that's kind of how the brand book looking at the moment. It's in progress. It's going to be relatively robust, I think, by the time it's finished. And the best thing about using a Notion is that we can really, really easily update it and all contribute. In every single page, there is a wish list. And yeah, feel free to just add things that you'd like to see documented, things that you might use that don't exist here yet. There's obviously a lot of placeholder things at the moment, like accessibility guidelines and things like that, which we don't really have written down. But yeah, hopefully this is kind of where it's going to head. Cool. Let me jump back into my presentation a second. Feel free to ask any questions. But yeah, presentation templates and guidelines and whatnot. So me and Josh partnered up at the beginning of this to kind of really try and understand where we're struggling with creating decks. Josh did a fantastic job of getting you all to contribute to the mirror board. We kind of went through a bit of a problem finding exercise, and thanks for contributing towards that. It was really, really helpful. Kind of extracted kind of the common pain points across the different use cases. Who's making presentations? What are they struggling with? Why are they making them? Who are they making them for? And in parallel to that, we kind of did a big stress test of all the different available options, so that we could find at least. So this includes the common stuff that we're used to using, like Google Slides and Keynote. We explored other tools that we already use, things like Figma, and even some Adobe products, just to see what they are capable of. And then we looked at some sort of startup kind of things as well. Like there's one called Pitch, which is essentially like Figma for presentations. There's another one called Ludus, which is kind of an up and coming alternative to kind of these templated sort of slide solutions, if you like. And we also did a bit of a benchmark and an audit of our existing stuff. So finding all the different versions of all the decks that we had, what are the commonalities, what types of pages we need, and then kind of prioritizing which ones we need the soonest, essentially. It was really interesting because we had the big issues. Each presentation I worked on needs to be created from scratch, which is very time consuming. Which is true. That was the case. There wasn't really like a theme or a template to use. And then we had the little stuff as well, which Josh put this, but M-dash bullets, minor formatting issues, which just kind of break the illusion of a brand. You might not notice it on the day-to-day, but all these little consistencies add up. And you kind of get this kind of Chinese whispers effect with documentation where, you're always using the latest one and you kind of, every time it changes, you're never catching up with where you're meant to be with the aesthetic of everything. This is kind of where we got to with it. We did test all of the different things, all the different available options. And for what we needed currently, the best solutions are still going to be Google Slides and Keynote, but for different reasons. Keynote is very, very good design for managing design. Google is very, very good for sharing. And I think we should take advantage of these rather than trying to look at a tool that kind of does everything in one. Both have got their downsides. Keynote we can make look really, really beautiful, and we can make it look like Elsewhen, and we can really keep on top of that consistency. Google Slides, it's rough and ready. It's much, much easier to share and collaborate with, especially with clients who, are much more likely to have access to Google than they are to iCloud. So we're starting to come up with a bit of a framework for how this system is going to work, essentially. So, and this is all going to be, once again, in Notion, where you're going to find these templates. So before you start a presentation, we just try and identify why we're making it and who for. And the general gist of this is really that Keynote is for new business projects, case studies, end of project deliverables. When we're appearing publicly, we need to represent ourselves in the strongest possible way. And then Google Slides is, we might already be working on a live project. We need to collaborate really quickly internally, or even with clients or big teams. Quickly sharing ideas where kind of, the design isn't the output. And we might not need design resources for this as well. So anyone can kind of jump into these and kind of use them. And the idea is that they will look, as close as we can get it to, using the Elsewhen brand elements. But there are going to be some sort of compromises. Some of the typefaces and things don't translate across as well. We said that, this is kind of where our Keynote themes are kind of looking. These are just a few screen grabs from some of the template pages. And the idea is to kind of not only address, the visual stuff with these templates, it's really kind of drilling down into workflows as well. So all of these pages are templated in a way that they're flexible enough that you can change the layouts. But things like color for data visualization, things like, it automates the dates in a 2-week sprint diagram if you change the first date. Header runners and things like that for chapter titles and document titles and dates are all automated. So we're kind of just removing any of those pain points of kind of copying, pasting across pages, trying to get things aligned properly. All of that stuff is locked and ready to go and really, really simple to use. Kind of a bit of a tangent while developing this as well. Like one of the big requests was to kind of have templates for data viz, charts, diagrams, that sort of stuff. So I actually used the same technique that we did for the Finecast color palette development with this. So often you get this battle between having brand suitable colors and things that work for data visualization. It's very, very rare that they can be used together because accessibility usually stops you from being able to use pure brand colors on data viz. Luckily for us, you can kind of see underneath there some of the sort of color blindness simulations across our brand palettes. And if we use them in a specific order when we're introducing to data visualizations, we can actually get away with using all of our brand colors, essentially, all of our primary ones, without having to change or introduce any new colors. So once again, that's really, really good for us because we can get a really consistent look and feel across all aspects of the brand. And I've also, as well, which is not quite up in Notion yet, alongside this, we've got best practice for all different chart types, inside and outside of Keynote. So, whether it's a simple pie chart or a donut chart or like a really complex scatter plot, the idea is that we can take these and we can use them in our white papers, we can use them in blog posts as well, not just in the Keynote presentations. This is all going to be wrapped up into Notion as well. I'm aware that I'm kind of just bombarding you with loads of information, so hopefully Notion will break it down a little bit easier for you. Demo, so I'm just going to jump out here. And this is actually obviously in one of the new Keynote templates. And I'm just going to kind of show you how it works. I apologize if the UI is very small in the screen share. I'm on an iMac, so everything's very, very tiny around the edges, but I'll try and zoom into the important bits. So when we jump into edit master slides here, we've got basically a Keynote theme, which kind of lives across all of our different document templates. So regardless of what document you're in, you'll have access to the same masters. We just might collect some of those masters together for you as a suggested layout for a certain type of document. So for example, if you're doing a project kickoff, it's going to be made up of all of these masters, but by default, it might contain just the ones that we think are the most useful. All of these different master types here, all with placeholder imagery, the correct typefaces, the correct layouts. There's a whole different range here. So, things like quotes, basic pages. We have specific styling for bullet points. We have 3-column views. We have, pretty much anything you could want based on how we've used presentations in the past and a few more. Templates for things like this, where it automatically does the underline based on the document color, themes and styling for different diagrams. It's all kind of in here. And one of the nicest things about it all is, things like this seems menial, but the amount of times I've wasted in the past copy and pasting headers in Keynote, we can now just change this on the go. Agenda, and that will flood through the entire document, regardless of kind of where you are. And, this sort of stuff is we're used to seeing in like things like InDesign. And it's a bit of a hack in Keynote, but it means it's going to save us ages.
That is so cool.
Which is really, really cool. And it floods through everything. So the project name, yeah.
How did you do it? Is it just like a setting that you choose, or?
It's a bit of a workaround. It's actually a formula in a table. So these header rows are actually a table, and there's a formula that just references a master slide.
Oh, cool.
And it's literally just doing a lookup. So on every page, it just looks up the first page and just finds this information and pastes it in. It's like super basic, but I never even thought about using that as an option before.
It's really
it's kind of a happy accident.
Yeah, it's really cool. Nice.
Cool, thanks. So that's really cool. And then also as well, all these documents and everything, there's essentially, I mean, this looks a bit messy because it's just like the storage file for all this stuff. But this is all of the different kind of style guides and all of the different components, if you like. We've essentially have a component library in Keynote for all of these things, which is super, super useful. And it means we can quickly do updates and roll out a new theme if there's anything wrong, or if we need to amend it, and that sort of thing, which is super useful. Also as well, one last thing from the keynotes, we've got kind of client overrides. So in one of the master pages, there's a page where we can change 4 things, so 4 colors, and it will flood the entire document with a new theme. So if we're setting up kind of a workflow with Spotify, for example, as we just started, I know Josh has kind of tweaked this already to kind of align with their own brand. You know, when we want to see the client relationship as more of a partnership and kind of aligned to their own brand values, we can just paste like literally 3 hex codes in, and we get a brand new template basically. So it still rings true to some of our typography, the way our logos work, and kind of our best practices, how we present. But it means we can bring in, you know, a bit of the brand identity from the client side as well. And yeah, rather than changing every single page, we update 4 little icons and press go, and it's done. So yeah, it's kind of not just about the design for this; it's also about efficiency as well. Just really trying to streamline that stuff. This is a kind of an ongoing process. So hopefully, as we're kind of using it live now, we'll start to get feedback on some of this stuff and making it even better. Hopefully, and there is also a Google Slides version of this stuff. Once again, it's not quite as robust, and it doesn't really have as many kind of customizable features, but it still looks good enough that, you know, anyone can jump in, put some work together, and, you know, have it client ready, and, you know, without having to do much work on styling. That's pretty much it. We can obviously chat about this stuff. In terms of, oh, actually, there's one more thing before I go on. The data viz stuff in Keynote. So we now have, this is a slightly older version of this document, but not only do we have kind of reusable, brand-friendly, hyper-accessible data visualizations, we have kind of a best practice kind of style guide for all of these things as well. So these have been specifically designed, these charts, to follow data viz best practices. So things like, you know, not having access labels when you can just directly number the bars, and all the colors are introduced in an accessible order. So if you were to go and edit the chart data, copy the year, you know, just for an example, paste it in, it'll automatically update. We can just literally paste Excel data into this stuff and plot, you know, pretty complex charts. You can even do, you know, crazy scatter plots with real data analysis stuff. It's all kind of here and in Keynote, which is crazy. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with it. There's kind of, I don't know if you guys are aware, there's a kind of a backlog of design tasks. We're kind of slowly going through those at the moment. So one of them's the brand book. We've got obviously the Elsewhen decks. We've got case study processes, which Josh and the guys do an awesome job with. And then there's a whole other kind of remit of other things as well. So newsletter templates, which we just started with Matt and Katie. We've got, you know, little things like the Elsewhen dribble and all these little things that kind of shape up to make the brand essentially. But yeah, that's kind of what we're working on. Thanks. Questions or comments, or I hate it.
It's so cool, man. Really, really cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's brilliant, man.
Nice.
Wait.
Crying with happiness inside. Literally.
So badass.
So cool.
It's really so badass.